All right. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to do the normal stream, but of course, we kind of got to get started with the worst news I think imaginable that hit over the weekend. It'd just be wrong not to at least touch on it. And we're not going to spend a bunch of time. So many outlets have done such an amazing job. All the teams, all the reporters have done such a good job covering the passing of the Gaudreau brothers. But just wanted to get started just mentioning it. We're going to talk about it briefly and get right into things as people are joining in. But to start with the intro, we're just a little salute to the Gaudreau brothers again, who passed away tragically over the weekend, and then we'll just kind of talk about it briefly and get right into the main part of the show. And muted. We're here with PuckLuck, Jay, and Matt tonight to go over everything. But just, I guess, to start it off, I'll pass it to Matt first. Just any thoughts about, the tragic event over the weekend, and we can just kind of keep going from there. Sad to start that way, but kind of gotta.
No, for sure. I don't think you can reasonably go into this and just, act like nothing happened. Yeah, I mean, it was a devastating morning on Friday. Thursday night, at least there was the hope that like it was all fake and, that everything was fine. But yeah, Friday morning was definitely a gut punch. I did read something today. Katie Baker at The Ringer. I love when she writes about hockey. She did an awesome piece on the Gaudreau brothers. I recommend anyone who's still interested in just reading the backstories and just sort of thoughts on them as people. That was a good one. And I guess just something I've been thinking about is like all these smaller players around the league. Basically saying they looked up to him, and he obviously wasn't the first one. I mean, Martin St. Louis comes to mind as someone from from my specific youth who was a small player and sort of made it big time in the way that sort of Johnny Gaudreau did. But like I think we all had those sorts of players on our teams, maybe growing up or in high school, or that if they just grew a little bit, they would be NHL players. And it just feels like obviously I was the gangly tall kid who, the short kids like to hip check. So like, I had a different experience. But like just all the talent in the world and just like, oh, they need that height to be an NHL player, that sort of deal, that size. And, Gaudreau certainly transcended that for a lot of players in the NHL. And it's safe to say, I think he left his mark just through that alone. Nothing to do with his off the ice, all around great person and all the other accolades that he received. So, yeah, I mean, it was devastating, but it's been nice at least to spend some time reflecting and remembering on sort of, what he brought to the table for all of us as fans of the sport.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off that with Friday morning, just waking up and seeing that news. It was just completely devastating, personally, for me to see that. I mean, Gaudreau is one of the nice guys around the league, and obviously he was a great player. And it just kind of made fantasy hockey seem irrelevant to me. And writing about anything hockey related that entire weekend. I know I was headed out of town that morning, and I had to obviously make some adjustments to the projections and whatnot based on the news, and just even doing so just felt sickening. It was just terrible. It's something I didn't even want to think about the entire weekend. Any actual hockey things or fantasy betting, any of that space. So it was just really tough.
I mean, you guys said it really well. I felt very similar of like, obviously the thread. It was one of those things where it just kind of kept creeping and getting worse as time went on Thursday night. You don't really need to talk about sort of that part of it. But of course, if you ever hear anything, just, definitely keep it to yourself, especially when there could be family members involved or anyone really involved out there that could be affected by posting something online of that nature. But after a few days of reflection, it did feel nice to see how many people kind of coming together, talking about how impactful he was to them, because it really was a player that transcended hockey in many different ways and impacted so many young players, including Cole Caulfield, who just announced he's going to be wearing 13 in honor of him, and a guy that would have never been a first-round pick without Johnny Gaudreau paving the way. All of this also to say that, we don't want to belittle the passing of also Matthew Gaudreau, who amazing stories coming out just about what a great person he was, and just a lesson we can all take of inclusion. It seemed like anywhere he went, he brought along everyone. The stories of players that weren't going to make teams that he said, I know, didn't know, knew or didn't know, but brought them into the team, ensured that they were felt that their entire tryout they had were a part of everything. So just two of the best, a family that's grieving, but again, it's impossible to move past this and just kind of go into a draft now. I know it just sucks to do, but we got to do it. 5 minutes is probably enough, unless if anyone else wants to say anything, and if anyone in the chat has anything to say. But I do think it's just important to touch on and hopefully have some closure for all of us, because it does feel like you're never gonna have closure, but just to get something out there and just, I don't know. I mean, I do think it's good for the grieving process.
Oh yeah, we certainly need a hard pivot. I feel like
The hardest of pivots would be to the rankings, which Jay have put together. There's more fantasy rankings that have come out from all of the media outlets. It felt like as soon as Jay put them out there, they're all like, well, we got to follow suit immediately. We can't collapse by the competition. So Dobler, EP Ringside. ESPN has something. Dauber. I said Dobler, didn't I? I literally was in my head thinking it's Dauber. I know. I said Dobler and I meant Dauber, and I knew I was going to say it wrong.
Magical.
Sorry. But yeah, I mean, everything's out now, including the Athletic. I haven't looked at any other ones yet, but the Athletic were pretty easy to manipulate. So if you want to test their rankings out against PuckLuck, I think that'd be a fun way of doing things. I plan on actually just trying to draft a few, just to try a couple different processes and see maybe and label them as like, this was an Athletic one, this was PuckLuck. See how it goes. You never know what the lobby's going to bring you, but will be fun to play along with. But we got Jay here, and everyone's probably tuning in to hear him talk, and then here I go on my normal DJ nonsense of talking nonstop. So why don't I pass it over, let him have the floor for a minute, and go over a little bit about the PuckLuck rankings, what went into them. Maybe we'll compare and contrast what you think you put together compared to the field, and why you're so confident in the product.
Should we join a draft first before he goes, just to make sure we don't miss one?
Yeah, we can get in one. There is 3 of us, so that helps.
Okay, Jay, floor's yours.
Yeah, so I did release an article on PuckLuck today, just kind of going over the rankings themselves. The projections are one thing. How I project the players, it's a little more in depth, so it's going to take a little bit longer to write, but I do plan on getting that out this week as well. But as far as the rankings, when you see these projections, no matter what these players are projected for in point totals or shots or anything like that, there's a lot that goes into actual rankings to get these players ranked in a certain slot. So one of the major things to start with, I create like this rating system for these players that basically it's pretty subjective in the sense that it's based on a standard projection, an upside projection, and also just per game projections. And the weight of that is where it's subjective. I think right now I have it even split into thirds for the 3, the standard, the upside, and per game, to create this rating. Because basically when you're drafting best puck, obviously you're drafting for upside. You want players to have spike weeks. And so the upside and the per game value should, in my opinion, weigh into it more than just median or average projection. And then on top of that, there's adjustments for positional value. Average positional value weighs into it to kind of even out the positional scoring. Centers obviously tend to carry a little more value, but you draft less of them. Wingers, there's more wingers drafted, but they can be kind of all over the board. And goalies have a completely different rating system, scoring way of scoring in general. So to even that out, there's an average positional value adjustment into it. And then there's value over replacement. You guys did a lot of good work and research in the last few years on the best lineups to draft based on structure, how many centers, how many wingers, how many defensemen, how many goalies. So it's based on that 3-7-3-3, 3 centers, 7 wingers, 3 defensemen, and 3 goalies, and it creates a replacement value Basically, you times that by the 12 teams, and you look up the 36th best center and what he scores, and that's your replacement value. So there's a value over replacement that weighs into these rankings as well, which can kind of spike certain positions and kind of get everyone into certain tiers where you need them to be. One of the major things then that I also noted was don't ignore ADP. Um, Moods, you'll probably say ADP weighs into it pretty heavily. I agree. Could it
Yep.
be too heavily? That's again subjective. I think it is kind of heavy into it. But I don't want to miss out on players personally based on where they're going in the draft because you just won't see any exposure to certain tiers of guys in the draft based on ADP and PuckLuck's rankings if you're following them intently. Uh, there's general consensus, obviously. That's what makes up the ADP. A lot of people just follow along with ADP when they're drafting. So is it their true opinion? You're never too sure about that. Um, but then there's smart drafting. Obviously, the PuckLuck rankings have some players ranked significantly higher than where they're being drafted or significantly lower. The guys who PuckLuck has ranked higher, you don't want to draft, 3 rounds in advance when you can sit back and take them, take other players and still get them. So you also want to minimize overexposure. If you don't weigh ADP into your drafting and you go based on PuckLuck's rankings, you're going to be drafting the same players over and over. There's just certain guys that are rounds ahead that you're just going to be heavy on exposure, and you don't necessarily want that. Obviously, you want to be heavier than other players, but you don't want this crazy overexposure because obviously so many different things can happen throughout the season, including
Yeah.
injuries.
Yeah. No. Sorry to cut you off, but
No, go
so I will say last week I talked a lot about how I'm personally thinking of the rankings, and I walked through a couple of the specific situations, Jay, that you and I actually talked about in Twitter DMs, just sort of going over the specific cases, the Vegas defenseman, so on and so forth. So go back to last week if you missed that and want to sort of hear my thoughts on more in depth on what I'm looking to do with rankings and sort of how I'm personally thinking about it. But I will say, like, the exposure, overexposure, underexposure is largely it's more of an like the cliche. It's more of an art. Like that's sort of how I think about it. It's not necessarily that it's good or bad to be overweight, underweight certain players, but it's a way to sort of manage your risk exposure. Like that's just how you need to think about it. There are some people in the Discord who have already said, I have 60% of this guy, and I know that if this guy has a bad season or gets hurt, I'm probably dusted. I'm not winning that 25K. But if I'm right, I have several outs to it. So, like, there's a lot of different, I think, thought processes that can go into it. But I do think you're right that because what you're doing, and I'll ask some more questions about this as we go on, is so much about the science part of it. Whereas, I know you have a lot of thoughts on the game of hockey, but you're building a model that is not saying, ask Jay this question based on the answer, give projection. Like that's just not how you're going about things. So that in order to make sure that the science isn't getting too overblown, it's mixing in the ADP, like you're saying, to make sure that we don't get too off the rails. And that's probably a decision that, an experienced user in Excel or something could undo if they want to. But I do agree with the base default setting being to over lean into ADP, because ultimately the field is the best generator of this knowledge. I showed in the Best Puck Manifesto that, like, if you skip past ADP several times within a draft, you're not likely to make money on the year. Like just in aggregate, that happened. Even for people like me and DJ, like we weren't able to overcome the ADP value lost. Um, and so that's something that I think that is worth considering when you're using rankings like that. And so I'm not disagreeing with what you say when you're, stressing that the ADP itself should be baked in. But it is important to note that it is baked in because, for example, you have Austin Matthews putting up the most points this year from underdog standpoint, yet he's ADP 3, ranked third because he's ADP 3 right now. That's just something I found interesting and that you can sort of use to sort of build on your own process when drafting.
Yeah, and that's why if you download the rankings, you can see the pre-adjustment rank of each player. So you'll see that Austin Matthews is ranked first, McKinnon second, and McDavid third, when really they're reversed in the rankings after the adjustment. And
Mhm.
it's really in there just so you kind of get an understanding of um, what effect this adjustment is having on these rankings. It's one thing to put the projections out there where you can actually see the goals projected, the assists projected, the shots projected, all of that. But then converting it into this rating and then ranking it is different. Pre-adjustment. So I wanted to make sure the pre-adjustment rank was in there as well. And then
Yeah.
and then there's that one column that shows the value over uh, ADP essentially, and that's with all this adjustment baked into it. But I noted in the article that I wrote today, maybe you want to do one, similar column, but with the pre-adjusted rankings, just to get an idea of just how heavy above everyone, above ADP,
Yeah.
these rankings
And
are before adjusting
if
for
you
ADP.
want, yeah, and if you want, again, I walked through this all last week, sort of how I'm thinking about it, how I'm using it. I will say a reminder that I am, or that Jay is updating these as we get new information. Obviously, we're not getting much information at the current moment, but like obviously for the latest, you would want to go to puckluck.com and get that for yourself. And I will say, we mentioned the Athletic and Dauber and EP Rinkside, all put out their fantasy rankings. These are specific to underdog. So if you're drafting on underdog, you're going to need to make a lot of assumptions or just stretches to make those rankings fit what you're trying to do. Versus Jay's already done that work of applying like NHL statistical output to the underdog platform and to the underdog game that we're playing in the best puck world. So that is sort of a leg up on those sources. If you're weighing which one do I use, which one should I value more heavily, ultimately that decision is yours, but it's worth thinking about that too.
And we
Um,
should probably just give merit to the process. We've shown that it works. Using these rankings as a guideline. I mean, how many best puck finals do we have between us? Like it's a lot, and everyone else who's used them. It's there now. It part of it is we're in the space together, kind of. So it's a tight community, but there is proven success behind this process, and it's hard to find any underdog rankings anywhere on the internet. So um, we're kind of pioneers, I guess, in that sense.
yes, absolutely. So specific to the process, as you're sort of talking about it. I know you write it all up on your on your site. Um, my question, sort of just from a general sense, is obviously you have a model built. No projection system can account for everything that goes into projecting a future season. So what specific parts of it that you're willing to share at least like are, hey, Jay had to make this assumption, be it, power play share or who's on the power play or, rookies ascension, like what sort of things in the projections are like things that you actually had to think through versus things that you sort of built the model and, the model did most of the work.
So I guess the major thing is games played is really the major thing because this model will spit out based on similarities between players in the past who have put up similar numbers, similar games played. Um, it's not perfect because injuries obviously are different or reasons for missing games are different. So that's one of the things to just kind of get games played to where they kind of need to be for certain players. That was a manual adjustment. Not a lot else was a manual adjustment. This whole projection system, I kind of overhauled it this year and it tested a lot better. I basically used a bunch of simulations of seasons, but these simulations were based off of similar players who have similar outputs in the past, at, as the player I'm trying to project for. So excluding, so it's not like for Connor McDavid, obviously the most similar to Connor McDavid's season last year was Connor McDavid's previous 3 seasons, but
Uh-huh.
that's those aren't accounted for. It's just other players, and I want to see based on aging curves too, how much the 22-year-old who looked like I don't even know if JJ Peterka is 22. I think he is 22-year-old JJ Peterka. How much did someone who looked like him at that age? How much did they improve the next year in all these different categories, isolated? So, if they shoot like JJ Peterka, how did they improve? Did their goal totals go up? Some of the metrics that factor into it. How did those look to help predict where JJ Peterka's goals will be next season? So it's pretty in depth, and that's why it took me forever to churn them out this year.
Yeah,
But I
that's really
really,
cool.
I was really, really happy with the results. Part of it was playing around with players that I'm most familiar with. Obviously, I cover the Sabres, so seeing Tage Thompson up close, I know last year he was hurt, right? For the majority of the year, it bothered him. It hampered his production. Towards the end of the season, he started to turn it up, and it's like, okay, so how do we get close to the last 20 games of Tage Thompson? Um, so it was kind of like let's see similar players, and obviously, still even with playing through that injury, he had some very high ranking, similarities, high ranking players that he's similar to. So their kind of leap at his age and where their point totals were. He's at the age now where he should be seeing career highs. So the rankings quite didn't get there for him. Obviously, he had that one huge outlier season, which looks like an outlier right now. We're still unsure as to whether it will be, but they look a lot closer to his production in the last 20 games of last year. So I was really happy with kind of how it improved how some of the younger players improved from over last year. With these projections, it kind of fits where aging curves should be for some of the fantasy relevant players. And then I also liked where it kind of made up for these outlier one-off bad seasons for a guy like Tage Thompson or somebody else that I can't really think of that falls into that category.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you'll never be able to manually account for all of those situations, and arguably, but I'm not sure that that's even something that a model maker should be tasked with doing themselves, because at the end of the day, where's the line between subjectivity and objectivity? Those are all things that I'm sure you've had to think about and weigh to make the best decision. Um, and so when it comes to these younger players, you're not pulling in outside of the NHL data, right? You're basing it on basically like draft capital and sort of like minor personal opinions on the various players. Is that right?
So it's based on obviously their draft position weighs into it. So someone like Jack Quinn is showing a big leap this year. He was drafted fairly highly in the first round, and that has partly to do with it. But other parts of Jack Quinn's game are hinting at he might be able to take this leap. So whether it's his uh, time on ice averages, his production rates in each situation, how he affects his teammates, all this weighs into it. So and who he's playing with this year, that weighs into it. There's not really a big difference for Jack Quinn in particular, but for JJ Peterka, if he spends the whole season or a good majority of the season with Tage Thompson and Alex Tuck, then his production should definitely take a leap. So
Yeah, and how much of the ranking is based on those projected pairings? For example, Jeff Skinner and Connor McDavid. If you look at Jeff Skinner on his own and you say that he's getting power play 2 time, he's probably not worth a pick in this format. Like just objectively because of the time on ice and the lack of power play 1 on an Edmonton team where obviously a lot of the offense flows to the power play 1. But because he's directly tied to Connor McDavid in most people's models, like is that accounted for in the best puck rankings? Is that something you manually account for? Like how is like that specific situation or other situations that you can think of, driven?
so it's baked into the projections. So when you look at like the Oilers in particular, obviously, like you said, Skinner should see a lot of time at even strength with McDavid and or Draisaitl. So um, that's baked in based on where was, as a group, as a 5-man unit, where was McDavid's, like, anyone playing with McDavid, where was their output last year? And then it isolates McDavid's effect on everyone else, essentially. So
Mhm.
with Skinner, he's obviously spent his whole season with the Sabres. So we isolate Skinner and then apply that to the Oilers. And it's like, okay, so his even strength scoring rates, are they spiked by Connor McDavid? Obviously they are. Whereas
Spoiler
someone
alert.
else,
Yeah.
if he gets stuck with Corey Perry, maybe they get dragged down a little bit. And then obviously it's set for different situations, because one of the major components of the PuckLuck model is treat even strength, power play, and shorthanded as 3 separate games, essentially, because you're trying to achieve different things at those times. So on the power play, obviously Skinner's outputs are a little different than they are at even strength, just historically. He was the Sabres' leading goal scorer last year on the power play, surprisingly, but
Hmm.
it doesn't mean he had strong rates relative to the rest of the league as far as power play output. So, and historically, he really doesn't have strong rates. So if he was on that first unit, which he's not projected to be, but if he was, that would kind of bring them down just a little bit as a unit. But also his totals would come up just because that unit's so strong. So it all kind of counterbalances. There's correlation estimates, really, is what's caked into
Okay.
it. So top 6 players will play with bottom 6 players, but not as much. So it's all weighted based on where they project in the lineup.
Yeah.
I do
And
think
that
this is the
all
longest I've gone without talking.
it's
I guess
been
it's
great,
not my turn still.
honestly.
I'm proud of you.
I literally just keep like thinking like, you know what, this is going too well right now that I actually am worried I'm done. Like my career's over. Like we did get a question, and I was gonna maybe jump on it. Unless if Matt, you really had something you wanted to get off your chest here.
Nope, I need to make some picks
No.
here.
So okay, great. Yeah, Billy is in. How much of your process is knowing puck versus statistically driven? What are some solutions where the rankings are IK being? So let me just first off just say one thing that I think is important here. And like I do think that it really depends on how many teams you're drafting. And it might sound braggadocious to be like if you're drafting 150 like I am, but I do think you can do a lot more, you can get away from some stuff. You can try different things. You can definitely I think having zero statistic backing or anything like driving what you're trying to do is obviously wrong. But even if you're just getting a little bit different to get different and try to do a little bit more puck knowing, but I really don't know. I think the discrepancy between the amount of knowledge that's cooked in to the NHL kind of offering comparatively to football is just so much different that you're really not gaining that much ground by trying to get different by knowing what you know instead of using what the math is telling you. You're probably just better off sticking to it more often than not. But I do think you can get different in other ways outside of like I'm taking player X over Y just because I should get different this time, and more of like how you're constructing your draft allocation. So I'll start there. Is there any thoughts on the first part
As,
of the question?
as much as I appreciate your input, DJ, this was mostly specific to the rankings. So we'll let Jay speak for sort of.
Well, yeah,
It's sort of.
I haven't talked
And
in a
Billy, I
while.
did. Okay, I did ask him specifically what is like manually inputted versus things that the model is outputting. So that is sort of covered, I think, right before you joined, actually. But I'll let Jay speak to the specifics of the question.
Yeah, and Billy clarifies that it was not for DJ, so we'll let DJ sit there quietly again. Yeah, honestly, so a lot of my process is statistically driven. I do I don't I don't want to sound crass or something. I mean, I know puck. I go to the games. I watch a ton of hockey. Um, so I like to, honestly, one of one of the ways that I watch games now, I like to have a feel for the teams and the players, and kind of like where they fit and how things are in relation to the stats. So I see the numbers every day, so I know those, they're like in the back of my head at all times. But um, to visualize it and see it, kind of just put to motion, that's how that's how I enjoy a game nowadays. So, the obviously, where players rank in the lineup, whether they project to be in the top 6, where their correlation is with their teammates, all that kind of stuff kind of involves knowing puck. Um, Obviously, you could do some research and just kind of fill things out, but, I mean, I have projected lineups all set for every team and, projected, games played for every single player. So it as far as, like, the manual games played and stuff, it's like, okay, hate to bring up this situation, but obviously we were thrown a wrench, with Columbus, and it's like, okay, so who's most likely to get called up? And I just kept staring at Gavin Brindley, and I'm like, I feel like it might be him. Like, I feel like he might be ready for a full-time NHL shot this year. So it's a lot of it is knowing puck. I do have more. I had to spike his games, Brinley's games, a bit just based on this, but I could be completely off. And one of the other things too is with coaches. I kind of like to know who they're putting out in certain situations. Obviously, you can do research and find this stuff, but when you're watching a game, it's like, okay, is he leaning on these players heavily in defensive situations? If they're down a goal, who's finding the ice, who's I mean, McDavid's going to be on the ice. Hyman's out there. Draisaitl's out there. Is Evander Kane out there, or is he going with someone else? Why is Ryan McLeod out there? Last year in certain of those situations. So you're just
Watch
you,
it. You're talking
so
to the world's #1 Ryan McLeod fan here.
Yep, yep. So you just gotta a lot of it, is having all that combined. All that knowledge combined is where it plays into the rankings. But obviously
Yeah.
for the model itself, it's just hardcore stats, data science. A lot of it is that. So I don't necessarily pick out these similar players. It's all, similarity scores based on statistics. So some of them, I wouldn't even think, and I'm like, and then you see it, and you're like, oh yeah, they do kind of play like this person in 2011. So, yeah, that's basically where it is. So I hope that answered the question.
No, and I think that did. I think it's pretty clear that like in what you're doing, there's just less leeway for such applications. Now, obviously, are some situations like you talked about, versus if you're logging into this stream every week and you're sort of watching DJ and I draft, we're not doing anything statistically driven to arrive at our assertion that for me Cutter Gauthier is like a great late round pick, like that sort of deal. um so it's certainly a lot less, I think, IKB in what Jay's doing than like just what I would put out there if I were to put out like rankings for best puck. I'm not doing so. I have no plans to do so, but like I do think that is important to note. Like if you're looking for a true, uh, not a true source, because obviously every projection is a guess. It's a mathematically educated guess with a lot of manual inputs and sort of assertions that otherwise you might not have if Jay weren't manning the helm carefully. But it is a guess nonetheless. But it is one that is, I think, less IKB than you might suspect from like an Evan Silva, for example. If you're an ETR person and Evan Silva puts out his Evan Silva's 150, he might be 25 spots above on a certain player because he just likes the guy. He doesn't have like some model that's telling him this running back is one of the best 20 picks in the world, yet he's 45 and underdog ADP. That's just the way Evan sees it. And so I would say this is a lot different than like that sort of ranking, if that makes sense to Billy.
Yeah, and
I
sorry, and just to play off of that, I wanted to make rankings that take subjectivity out of it as much as possible, because you have your own opinions that you'll form on these players, and this is just kind of the backing behind it. Like, you can check with your own opinion and see where this player ranks, and you may agree, you may disagree, you may be like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, or I feel validated now in why I like this player because the rankings there. So I just try and take as much subjectivity out of it because you're going to apply that in your draft. I apply it in my draft. I don't follow these as gospel. It's not like every single time I'm taking, the seventh ranked player over the eighth ranked player if they're both available. It's just I have certain opinions too, so I just want to, make these, you know, less subjective.
Yeah, and the ETR folks out there, that's exactly what I was going for. That Jay's not doing anything like off the cuff, sort of, so to speak. And not to say that off the cuff is a bad thing. Obviously, if someone with expertise and longevity in the fantasy space, be it football or hockey or whatever, their opinion is valuable. But these aren't Jay's opinions just put onto a page and packaged and sold. These are hardcore mathematical details going into blood, sweat, and tears, if you will. So yes, of course, Billy had to give DJ a compliment. I'd hate this. I just should have just kicked him off. We were having a great time,
I
Jay.
mean, you could call me kitchen because I've made finals, but I've won enough, I think, to where I go above kitchen and into more of a silver range. But it could be worse. All I could say is I could be an absolute bozo. I could be I can't even think of the guy's name right now. Val, or is it Sal? Sal
Vitri.
I don't know. Yeah, it could be Sal Vitri. I mean, he could have really roasted me over the flame, so I really appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, we are doing a draft. I don't know, DJ, if you had any other questions for Jay. I did want to just plug the site specifically. I know we've shared it a few times, but it's obviously a little bit more built out. PuckLuck.com. You can navigate to the best puck tab pretty easily. But yeah, make sure you sign up and get a package if this is something that interests you. Jay did mention he wrote an article today, posted. Also, last year's articles are still included, and I think even 2 years ago there were articles sort of writing about strategy, and that still apply today. Maybe not players you're taking too high, but there are some strategy articles further back that do still apply to today's landscape. And so, just you can see here. You can filter it on the site. You can also download the CSV. And again, I went over the CSV in a lot more detail last week if you want to go back to that show. Let's see. So I am back on the clock here. DJ, any other questions for Jay?
Well, I'll ask two questions. Number one, I think the one thing that I'll just never, if anyone asked me, I couldn't answer it, but honestly, I don't even know if I could accept a great explanation. I guess I'm a firm believer in when I'm drafting a player, I'm just assuming he's going to be as healthy as possible. So what goes into the game projections? And do you think it's worth someone's time to say, you know what, who cares about this? I'm not drafting this player like he's playing 68 games because that would be much worse than what could. I mean, like there's what level of probability is it 68 versus 80 versus, you know what I'm saying? So like, how would you answer someone that would just kind of wondering about that? And do you think that maybe that is something that when you're drafting, again, we're talking about a lot of different things and we're well beyond the realm of like ESPN rankings, right? We're going incredibly in depth into what we're looking at here. So how would you answer that? And do you think that that's something that could be adjusted out in like a way of building your own if you wanted to work off these, or does that be stupid?
No, not at all. That's why I said like the per game definitely weighs into it because I'm thinking of like seasons past. This is probably a really good example actually with Evander Kane, and everyone was pretty high on Evander. The model was projecting low games played for Evander. Obviously, he's had that in recent seasons, and last year was no different. Um, it it's like I said, it's not perfect because people mistake games for different reasons. Someone could be in the player assistance program, or and that's very different. We're kind of wondering where Patrick Laine is right now, right? He was in the player assistance program, but he was also hurt, wasn't he? So it's like, well, he hasn't had high games played totals. The model doesn't like him to play a lot of games. I think originally it spit out 31 games as his projection. I think let's see if I manually adjusted that. I did. I got it up to 63. Just to play it safer and get somewhat of an idea of, if Patrick Laine plays, this is what he can. This is how he, what level he can perform at. But I don't know. It's tough because you can't really predict, injuries or how many games someone's going to play. But you can see trends if players aren't playing that much. And then even guys you think that might have roles that don't. You might think, some guy's going to get called up and play a ton of games, but in reality, these rookies, second year guys who don't play a lot, it's very rare that they end up seeing a lot of ice time in the coming years. So it's tough. It really is tough, and that's why I had to apply somewhat of a manual adjustment to things. But um, it I tried to get it as close as I could to even out the playing field and kind of get realistic projections for players who have been projecting really low in games played in the model.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think it's a bit of my own bias because I think that there's something really sharp about, like again, like, so like, again, let's just think about like every one of your decisions on the decision tree when you're drafting, that's going to lead to your pick. And one of them could just, I think just saying like being a computer and being like this pick, this ranking is obviously not good enough, right? Different variables that go into it. And to me, I just find it kind of clouds my judgment a bit. Rankings, and they're all going to include it. So I find it interesting. But I think it's a big difference between a player like Line and a player like, I don't know. You could, I mean, Brad Marchand might be an interesting one to discuss. Like a lot of different things can kind of play into why you're debating between the games played. But, I don't know. Does anyone else have any? I mean, Velarde's an interesting case. We did get a question about Velarde here. I'm pretty sure you have him pretty high, but do you think
Yeah.
that Velarde is a guy that you like? Because I know people are getting like incredibly overexposed, like 60% levels. Would that concern you at all, or not really?
On Velarde in particular, that's who they're high on. I mean, so
Yeah.
obviously I project him very high. I mean, 38 goal projection is no slouch. 38 goals, 68 points in 67 projected games. He's another one who's missed a lot of time. So I'd just be wary of that. But I mean, his projections are strong on a per game basis, and a lot of it has to do. I know Wookie's a power play guy, so a lot of it has to do with being effective on the power play. So when you find a guy who's just going to have that opportunity and in that situation, I can't tell you not to draft him. Especially where's he going? Where's his ADP right now? Do you know?
It
ADP is different than
is.
where he went because he went early there. He's fallen actually a bit and then kind of come back up again. 145.8. Um, I think he's just a really good example of like where do you make your bets? And it depends on, to me, the situation with Velarde is like if he's your seventh winger in and you're kind of jumping the gun to get him in there, you're probably pretty well off there, and you might want to consider another allocation. But especially when you're behind, I think he's a good catching up point because I truly do believe he has that 35, 40 goal upside, which again might make you think, well, why not draft him every time? But again, like there's a lot of different decisions that go into this. I'm in a situation right now where I would have definitely jumped up a little bit. I don't even actually would have even been jumping up. Now I would have been right at ADP, but I think he's like an amazing guy that's going to move up. And again, we are projecting a little bit of like where these guys are going to end up. So
Let
he's
me say
interesting. Is
this.
there anyone else? Oh,
Well,
sorry,
well
what?
with on Velarde in particular, so Trevor Moore went the pick before him. I don't know how often that happens in particular, but think who Trevor Moore is slotted to play with compared to Gabe Velarde. Gabe Velarde's always going to be with Winnipeg's best offensive talent. Like it's just going to happen. Trevor Moore is not. Um,
Mhm.
he had a one-off season last year, and he's playing with Deneau. He's kind of glued to Deneau's hip. So I mean, do you really think that the upside on Trevor Moore is going to top Velarde's? There's no chance. So I would take Velarde all day. Maybe Moore is just I'm picking on Trevor Moore in this case, but
Yeah, for
even like
sure.
Dylan Gunther or someone like that.
What'd
Now
you
I
say?
love Gunther and what he brings, but who's he really playing with? So it's that kind of situation that I kind of look to. Velarde's always going to be net front first power play when he is healthy. So and then he's been attached to the first line ever since he's gotten to Winnipeg. And whether it's Ehlers or Kyle Connor on the other wing, and Scheifele at center, it's he's going to be playing with their best players.
Matt, is there anyone else you want to kind of mention in this range? Because I do think what a lot of people kind of tune in for is the later round guys. Like I know we have our opinion on some of the guys up top, but are there anyone else kind of down the line that you're like maybe you're low on and you're wondering if maybe Jake could change your mind on? I think that might be more interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's just talk about Luke Hughes for a second, because he's a guy who I frankly don't have much of, but you can see here I took him at 156 because frankly I needed a defenseman. I took Noah Dobson. You know, I reached out the olive branch. Obviously, I love Noah Dobson too, but Jay is all in on Dobson this year. Um, and so I only had one D, and I had, you know, an uncorrelated mess for my first 10 picks. Like, I don't think I got a single stacking option in there. So great job by me trying to do several things at once. But so with Nico Hischier in the fold, I said, well, let's try this Luke Hughes thing. So, you know, just teeing that up for you. This is a sort of player who is a super young guy. Obviously, all of the pedigree in the world. He comes in due to Dougie Hamilton's injury and does okay. I wouldn't say he smashed for fantasy purposes. Frankly, his rates were just a little bit low for what you would want from a shots, blocks, you know, hit standpoint. But obviously, the point potential is there. So, like, what do you have on Luke Hughes? Do you have available like the comps for him or anything of the sort that you could share?
I don't have that readily available.
Okay.
It would take a while to load up,
All
but
right, that's fine.
honestly, so with Luke Hughes' situation, again, he's a guy who's in competition for this playing time. It his projection is pretty solid, considering what he did last year. But again, Dougie Hamilton was out, so Hamilton may or may not be on that top unit. They may play together. Who knows? Like something weird could happen like that, where they're both sharing ideal power play time. But Hamilton's a shooter. Luke Hughes isn't, so he's more dependent on the players around him. I feel like to accumulate those points, and Dougie Hamilton just shoots away. So honestly, like I favor Hamilton over Hughes.
For sure.
Hughes can take a big jump. It's always possible with a defenseman drafted that high, but I think the history of the model really showed the history within the model really showed that defensemen don't take that big leap for a few years. Think how long it took Rasmus Dahlin to really kick it into gear offensively. So I kind of expect somewhat of the same with Luke Hughes. It might take another season or two before you really see a big jump and he becomes that elite offensive defenseman. Even his brother, it took a while, right? It took just a little bit. I feel like he's being overdrafted for a lot of years until last year, where it really, really hit. So
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned it here. Maybe I didn't, but I was looking at EP Rinkside, and they have Quinn Hughes as the number 2 defenseman in fantasy this year, which just seems crazy. But you know, also I don't know if this dude's auto drafting or not, but tough scene.
I will say
Okay.
another thing, I guess, in general that maybe is important to know, and maybe you can add to this.
Shit.
I know we kind of have already came up a couple of times, but it might be important, especially if anyone was going to like mention like, oh, you're drafting an underdog, you may want to check it out, these rankings, etc. Like one thing that probably doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that our rankings, but any rankings for any sport are adjusted for upside. So could you talk a little bit more about like what goes into that from a like, I guess that, and number two, what will be different about the rankings for Yahoo and ESPN that I believe are coming out pretty soon here. But so it just sort of yeah, I guess that probably, does that make sense? That question kind of asked it like an idiot, but I think you got it.
yeah, so for like season long leagues, your standard fantasy drafts, where in Yahoo or ESPN, obviously the scoring's different, so that's adjusted for. But
Yep.
it's not as much. You want more consistency throughout the season, I feel like, than necessarily spike weeks. Upside does weigh into it, but it's not. Um, it's just not as, I guess, important as best puck, where only certain guys are slotted in every single week. It really depends on where you're drafting these players as to whether you're drafting for major upside or not. So it's like in your fantasy football league that you just drafted or whatever. When you're picking bench players, you're taking guys that you hope can peak. reach a ceiling. Where it's kind of the same in fantasy hockey. So um, to show the consistency of the top players, I think is kind of crucial. So upsides just weighed in just a little bit less, and obviously you want guys who can play the entire season. That helps too.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, the question here, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. Obviously, take some time to figure out what's going to happen. But I mean, as of right now, I feel like there's not even a reason to really project who's going to take over the power play spot because there's no one that could even come close to doing what Johnny Gaudreau did for that team. So it's just like,
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, you mentioned Bridley, but there's a bunch of young guys that conceivably make at least a iota of sense
Yeah.
there. But like, it's just
it,
so
I mean,
incredibly
it's still
hard
not
right
power
now,
play
and it
one.
just kind of feels. Wait, what?
Go ahead, Moods.
it's Kent Johnson to me. Like
Yeah,
someone built in a lab to play like Johnny Gaudreau. Obviously, he hasn't done it in the NHL at a high level yet, but like you're talking highly touted, super talented. Like Adam Fantilli probably gets an easier runway to like top six and power play one type role. But if you're looking for someone to sort of fill that void, like I think Kent Johnson's the one who sort of, profiles the best to step into something like that. But yeah,
Yeah, it's Fantilli who I think becomes the focal point of power play one. I think play's going to kind of run
yeah,
through. Well, I mean, it runs through Werenski. He's the quarterback, but um, Fantilli's kind of going to be the guy they kind of look for now to control the puck off the half wall. I think maybe Sean Monahan's been good in the high slot, but so is Kirill Marchenko in that role. So um, Marchenko likes to get off that
yeah,
little quick one timer from the high slot, but he doesn't have Gaudreau feeding him anymore from that left side. They're both, with Marchenko and Fantilli right shots. I don't know exactly how they're gonna fill that out. Monahan might shift out to the flank and then Boone Jenner in front. I have no idea how that's really gonna work. I mean, Kent Johnson, Yeager, Chinnikov, obviously those guys are
yeah.
talented. So it's gonna be a committee thing and until they see what works.
Yeah, I mean, just from a strictly gross standpoint, there are no winners here. Like everyone on Columbus gets worse because this this guy's no longer there with them. So that's really, I think, the gist of it. Like a lot of their offense did run through him, even though he was objectively worse than he was in Calgary. Like that offense was still pretty reliant on him to create. I don't think like the Russian line of Voronkov, Marchenko, Chinnikov was producing all of that like I guess, reliable offense. Like they obviously were productive, but that was largely percentages driven and not necessarily like overwhelmingly dominant or anything of the sort. So we are just going to sort of have to wait and see to just if they can fill that void.
yeah.
Who does it again? Probably by committee. Is your best bet, and just knock all of them down a bit where you were drafting them from before. Is my opinion. Now, if you want to, talk about inspiration and sort of the resilience and all of that stuff, I totally get it. But that's just sort of how I'm treating it at this moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the main note, and I try to touch on, is like everyone does get worse though, and yeah. But other than that, why don't we run through this draft quickly, if that's all right? I did start from the one hole. I
Sure.
mean, we didn't say a single pick, and I'm sure the audio listener gets much better serviced in theory just by like actually having a bit of a discourse on fantasy hockey in general. So maybe this is even better of a format. Definitely let us know in the comments. But I'll run through my team. I did draft, like I said, 101. The influencer 101, but it doesn't really even phase me. I'm just like, yeah, sure, why not? 101, who cares? I went Connor McDavid. I know I mentioned this. I think no, maybe I didn't mention this yet, but I believe based on the rankings and the scoring that you enter into the Athletic, they have McKinnon as the number one, then McDavid, then Matthews. Whereas Matthews scores the best in PuckLuck, and then McDavid, then McKinnon. Is that right?
Matthews, McKinnon, McDavid.
Yeah.
Matthews, McKinnon, McDavid. Okay, so
McKinnon stays
with
too.
that
Yeah.
being said, I think I still, and again, I'm not going to go into detail. I think all three of these players have 25K winning upside, and I'm going to try to spread my exposures out, and getting McDavid is the hardest. So I went with McDavid, then I went with Bouchard at the turn. Just a correlation that's getting harder to get. People are definitely taking him over a lot of these wingers. Kyle Connor, because I didn't want to get completely buried at wing. Barzal was my next guy in. I was really going to click on Demko at 49, but just decided maybe just wait a little bit longer. My exposure is already to the moon on him. I'm like 22% Demko. And while it does sound very promising that he's skating, could be back maybe a lot earlier than we anticipated, just, him versus Georgiev, I don't really think it's all that much different. So why not, take the guy that sorry, 1 second, just on the clock here. But yeah, so went with Georgiev. But any thoughts on Demko? I guess a good little jumping off point. Just again, sounds like he's skating.
Yeah, we don't have a great answer on. I guess it is good news that he's skating, but there's not really any. I mean, camp starts in like a couple weeks, so like if he still misses camp, like that would not be the most surprising thing in the world. So I would say we did get an update, which like is good. He's not out for the year, but I would say we're not that much closer to knowing whether he's back in October or November or even December at this point. So I'm still pretty much staying away.
Yeah.
If he starts to fall past the Stuart Skinner, Markstrom, Ullmark tier, then maybe I'll start considering him. But like I think those guys are pretty much locked into solid roles that I'm not really afraid of.
And that report was kind of in 3 parts. Part 1 was like, we have really good news. Demko is skating before camp, looks good, looks great. Shilov's, on the other hand, not so good. Might be worse than we anticipated. We don't know yet. Coming back, still a lot of ambiguity. And then the third part is like, and they're still trying to get Lindgren. Not Lindgren. Oh my God, they're still trying to get Lankinen. And that last part was obviously the most concerning for your Demko drafter. And to me, like listening to that, it kind of makes me think that they still really don't know. And I heard, and again, who cares what I hear? We'll find out. But it was that Lankinen is asking for a bit more than Vancouver can possibly stomach. That was somewhere around $2 million for the 1 year. He knows he has a lot of leverage for a team that gets desperate. Will that come true? I don't know. I think he'll end up somewhere in the middle of the, about 1.3 to 5, and we'll find out. But if Vancouver signs him, that is very concerning. And if they are pushing, as their report says, that's probably the most concerning part of this. Matt, you were shaking your head and you weren't having fun.
I never have fun talking about goalies. But no, I was surprised that Lankinen is being aggressive, and did every other goalie just cease to exist? I don't know. I don't know where his leverage comes from. But
you're more of an insider than Moody. So, any thoughts on what I just said?
I bumped up Yuri Patera in the rankings today. If that has any effect.
There you go. Where else are you getting daily Yuri Patera bumps based on the news, people? So support Jay. PuckLuck.com.
You love to see it. Anyways, though, always interesting to track that stuff because Demko at 52 could end up looking like a steal, but we'll find out. I had then went with Binnington. Just he's the faller that came to me, and I didn't want to take Tuck, DeBrincat, Vetrano. I just decided whatever. I feel like Binnington's going to continue to fall. 72. What did I do wrong, Matt?
We're going to spend more time talking about your draft than we did drafting.
All right, fine. I went Binnington, and then I went Mo Seider. Now you might be thinking to yourself, DJ, you're going to talk longer? Yes. I went 1 center, 2 D, 2 winger, and 2 goalie. And then I hammered wingers with Nachos, Michkov, Bo Horvat in the mix to go with Barzal, Gunther, Lehkonen, Sharangovich. I took my first Drew Doughty. I said, screw it. I'm taking Drew Doughty here. Why not? No one can stop me. Celebrini falls to me because this wasn't a draft full of people that are Celebrini pilled. And finally, Dan Vladar, who I think almost every time I need a third goalie in the last round. Any thoughts on this team? Mr. Moody first, Mr. Gigglebot.
No, I think it's fine. Yeah, anytime you get McDavid and don't immediately take 7 centers, because that's what drafters seem to do in our lobbies, you've done good. So good job.
Okay. You can talk now. I got to take it.
I can talk now about my team. I don't like my team.
Yeah,
I didn't have fun. I was more enjoying the vibes of chatting with Jay, an intelligent being, about his mathematically sound process. So
what are you trying to say?
This was certainly secondary, and there were several times where I looked and I had 21 seconds on the clock. Let's figure out who the hell's on my team and what pick we're at. But so I took Forsberg and Kachuk at the 12-13 turn. They were just the top two there by ADP. It looked like Jack Hughes was off the board. I had him sort of mentally pegged in, but if you ask me between Kachuk and Nylander, I probably side with Nylander, but whatever. ADP don't lie, and I think this might be my first or second Matthew Kachuk. Obi was sitting there for me at 36, so I just kept pounding my wing advantage in this lobby. So felt pretty good about that start with Ilya Sorokin's capping it off. With Jay in the room, Noah Dobson was a faller, so just had to grab him. I think I have the page up somewhere. Let's just see where Jay has Noah Dobson. He has him ranked as the pre-adjustment, I believe D2. Is that right? 87 points on the year, just crazy. And he blocks a ton, shoots a ton. Like he does everything that like a Quinn Hughes, for example, doesn't. So if he has that sort of season, absolutely smash.
So his projection, he's kind of at that point where Quinn Hughes was last year, where that leap's projected. Though you want to see signs from a true number one defenseman. If Noah Dobson was going to be a true number one defenseman, and last year he kind of filled that role. Adam Pelech played less time. Ryan PuckLuck was hurt for a little bit, but he played less time too. Noah Dobson was truly like their number one defenseman. He played the even strength minutes. He played the top power play. He was very successful in both. So he showed all the signs you expect for someone to take a big leap. And I think that's why the model liked him so much and vaulted him to number two. I'm just watching the player personally. I think it's pretty much justified. Not necessarily that he's, D2, but he's right there with the top tier defenseman.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, there was a stretch when both Pulock and Scott Mayfield were out of the lineup where Dobson was legitimately playing 30 plus minutes a night, killing penalties. I mean, he was a built-in blocks bonus, hunting the shots bonus, even the points bonus was in play for him. So that was just a DFS bonanza. So we'll always take.
I do think his upside is not captured by his draft pick as well as everyone else's is so far. Like I think that we're not saying that he's not as good, or I'm not saying that he is better than Bouchard and Dahlin, but like they're pricing heavily, whereas he is just not. And he could be, and then that's the perfect point. Go on now.
Yeah. So then I took Slafkovsky. I honestly don't really remember making that pick. I probably clicked him, so good for me. At this point, I was out on centers. I feel very bad not getting like a Jack Eichel type, but as my first center, that's sort of like the last guy that I at least would like to have. So missing that, I knew I wanted to get pretty heavy on center. So Larkin just was there. I was unable to take Raymond with him, which I noticed after I clicked on Dylan Larkin. So maybe I would have clicked Wyatt. I don't know. Whatever. Who cares? I took Darcy because I love Darcy. I've seen multiple things now. I believe EP Rinkside had Kemper as like the sleeper goalie. So he's just going to keep getting steamed up this board, but they're a quality regular season team. And who cares about the playoffs for best puck purposes? Who cares about the NHL playoffs? So
can I interject on Kemper real quick? One of the new things, and I didn't mention this because I focused on skaters with the projections, but one of the new things in my research is goalie environments and how they affect goaltenders. And LA has a very, very strong goalie environment. So throwing a goalie like Darcy Kemper into that environment should yield pretty good results. So I really like his projection this year. An example of the opposite effect this year is Linus Ullmark. Depending now, that can vary because the coaching's changed. So maybe they play a little bit different. Maybe the goalie environment improves. But it doesn't bode well based on the players that are there in Ottawa for.
So here's one that isn't necessarily a best puck driven, but a team for years that I've loved to take goalies for is Minnesota. Dating back to Bruce Boudreau, they had this system, insane amount of shots from the point and not a lot of shots from the dangerous, from the slot, the low slot, high slot, whatever. And so this year, Philip Gustafsson looks like he's the lead, but it looks like a three-headed monster. between Fleury getting some starts, Wallstead getting some starts, and Gustafsson probably getting about 40, 45 starts. But it's really hard to tell what exactly they're going to do. Is the Minnesota situation also showing up to you as a quality environment? And if so, like, how do you see those starts playing out if there is a draftable Minnesota goalie, be it Gustafsson or like a last round Marc-Andre Fleury or Wallstead or something?
It's definitely a good environment. You can tell by just how much Gustafsson improved. Going there a few years ago from Ottawa. It's all of a sudden he's a number one
Huh.
goaltender. It's
Interesting.
funny how that works,
Yeah.
huh? But I don't know. The projections, he's going to be lower because there's just not that certainty of he's the workhorse
Mhm.
goaltender. Whereas
Okay.
Montembeault went right behind him. Not as good an environment, but he's going to get a lot of games. So it's really, I mean, you're taking a flyer if you're drafting any of the Wild goaltenders because you don't know. Like Fleury
Okay.
could garner most of the starts like he did last year, or Wallstedt could run away with the job, or it could be Gustafsson again, who puts up a
Mhm.
Vezina caliber season. So
Yeah.
it's again like a good drafter will have exposure to any of them at any point, but um, it's just not the workhorse that Kemper could potentially be in
Yeah, the,
LA.
the NHL Coach Speak index on the Wild situation was like, you know what? All of them are the best goalie in the world, and we love them, and they're bouncing back, and they're going to start every game possible, and it's just like, okay, like so, good luck. And yeah, I think that he's going to be a big faller, unfortunately, because I did end up taking a lot of Gustafsson, and again, that I think that that does bode well for him, that situation. I was going to ask, and maybe you have an answer, and maybe not, but maybe it's something worth researching. But um, was there a situation last year that went from horrific to pretty freaking good for a goalie? I mean, there's obviously things that could come to mind, and of course, some goalies can kind of carry the water enough, and there's examples of that as well. But I mean, I don't know if like
Well, DJ,
there's
you
different, I
you're
guess,
wearing the
goalies
hat
that
of the
yeah
one team
Mhm.
that it happened for.
Yeah.
yeah that's true.
I mean,
Yeah.
Ukko-Pekka
That
Luukkonen
you
was
know,
was
honestly, I
nothing
was
at
gonna
the beginning of last year. He was nothing
I
in
was
fantasy
honestly about
drafts
to
or
say is
anything.
like is Utah the team to watch for that, and yeah, it's probably the Sabres. Yeah, good point. Good point.
It's
Yeah, the
not. I
Sabres
don't think
goaltending
Utah's the team
situation
to watch
is
for
yeah,
that just because, like, I know what you're saying. They added Sergachev and Marino.
yeah.
I do like their coach. I kind of like what they're doing, but I don't think it's
Hmm.
going to change all that drastically. Ingram was good. I mean, he
Yeah.
was a good goaltender last year. The environment was okay. It wasn't terrible. When you're looking at, I don't know, maybe a Pittsburgh or something where maybe it could change and Jari could take a leap. He seems like an every other year goaltender anyway. But I don't know. I don't have one off the top of my head. I'd have to pull up the research that I did. All I know is Ottawa's still projected to do bad. I saw the crack in the comments about Travis Green not being any better, and yes, that's pretty much true.
What a weird
I
hire. What a weird
yeah.
hire.
Usually teams go with an opposite kind of coach or whatever to you know overfix, overcompensate, but it didn't seem to happen, and Travis Green didn't do any better in New Jersey than Lindy Ruff did with the defensive situation when he took over. So I don't know. I honestly, like, New Jersey can take that leap this year from really bad to good, just because I feel like they were just decimated by injury and they had
Yeah.
bad goalies to begin with, and now they have good goalies. Two, Markstrom and Jake Allen are both good goaltenders, and the situation could just be better with Dougie Hamilton healthy and Jack Hughes healthy for a good portion of the season. So
Yes, the AARP net in New Jersey. But yeah, I totally agree. Just the availability of players should be a major boon for them. Speaking of which, Nico Hischier was my ninth round pick. And yes, I successfully have taken longer to talk about my team than DJ did. So kudos
I
to me.
was,
Um,
well,
I
we
was about to say
interjected.
that. I interjected
yeah.
mainly as well. Actually, one more. No, I was gonna go.
Buchnevich, 109. I thought about taking Paterka, but
Let me
I was
tell you
like,
about
who am
Bush.
I?
No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really know what to do, so I just started taking players. I took Kadri and Toffoli. Again, I wanted to close up my center room just because I knew I was pretty weak there with Dylan Larkin being my center one, is that really going to hold up against even a regular season or obviously a playoff round with all these, monsters? Probably not. So I just wanted to sort of do it by committee, and getting Kadri there felt like a high upside swing on a player who shoots a boatload. To Foley, of course, I closed off my Macklin Celebrini stack by already taking 3 centers there. So, you're welcome, DJ, on the falling Celebrini. But that's exactly the sort of player who I love stacking, just because it's very clear that if one does well, the other one's almost certainly doing well as well. And then I talked about Luke Hughes already with Jay, so won't get into that further. Askarov, I still needed a third goalie. Feel pretty good about that situation working out favorably for Askarov, be it, even if it's 40 starts, like there's at least some usability there. And this is sort of the time of year where I'm going to start dipping into more of these late round goalies as we get more clarity and coach speak on these situations. Finally, Justin Falk, just a nice little cozy click. I had Bushnevich. I needed a little stack in there. Probably doesn't matter much because, what's Justin Falk going to do to really unlock some offensive potential, but it feels good. And I think Justin Falk is just a perfectly reasonable pick as well. And then finally, Jonathan Drouin. While every single Colorado winger has these question marks and are just catapulting up the board. Nichushkin is going. Actually, did Landeskog go in this draft?
Yeah, he did.
He went 147. Little early for my
personally,
but winger got pretty noobed.
Yep. These guys are catapulting up the board. Meanwhile, Nathan McKinnon's best friend and the guy who I was actually into last year, believe it or not, in Juin to close the year, he just is still hanging out there, being pretty much undrafted. So just take a swing on a guy who I don't know if I really wanted to, but it felt good in the moment. So that's my team. Yeah. Not one of my favorites.
I think that no matter what happens, Drouin's pretty locked into that position with McKinnon. And I will say that Lehkonen was on the ice and shooting, which is a really, really good sign. That doesn't mean he's going to be back for game one, but I do think that, like, you're getting your 6th, 7th winger, and that's a guy that was very likely to be with Casey Middlestat, which just absolutely clicked in the playoffs. So it's a good situation to bet on. I will also say that I still have not come around in Askarov yet, but I do think, especially when you have so many starts locked in, that kind of taking a guy that could get there later on, like if you're thinking he takes over the net, because he's just objectively not going to start 50 games. I just don't see that in his range of outcomes, being a rookie, never having a good exposure to the NHL. But could he come in April and get the bulk of the starts as the season comes to a close for a team that isn't going to be relevant, and maybe steal some wins and actually catapult into a good spot? He's draftable. Jay, I cut you off, and you're the star of the show here, and certainly not Bozo Donald. So I'm going to just mute myself and let you say what you're going to say.
Well, 2 things. Just on the Skarov real quick, I feel like, it doesn't it feel like now they have like a purpose of where to go in goal, and he is like the future. So they're going to want to work towards that sooner than later. I feel like, since they are working on playing their future guys starting this season with Celebrini and Will Smith. So I feel like, although Blackwood was very good last season, and they do have Vanacek, right? That's who's there, right? Vanacek. Yeah.
There,
I don't see Vanacek winning that job long term, and Blackwood just kind of seems like stagnant. Like, where's that really going to go? Yes, he can hold down the fort for the majority of the season, but if Askarov can play a good stretch down the stretch, a good amount of games down the stretch, then I feel like that's going to be his value. So he probably, you're looking for upside again with your late picks. And I called out.
Oh, sorry, no.
I called out Trevor Moore earlier for his one-off season, and yes, you're drafting Jonathan Drouin, off like a career season, but the difference is Jonathan Drouin is glued to McKinnon. Like, there's a reason for that one-off, whereas Trevor Moore just exploded with the same line mates, so it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe Fiala boosted him a little bit, but I just see, Drouin in the late rounds as a good pick just because of that correxelation.
Yeah. I'm famously high on Nathan McKinnon in Best Puck.
Yeah, I think
0% moods. Can I ask, Matt? I wondered if this was you ran out of time situation, or do you really like Slafkovsky over Cairo?
Again, I literally don't remember clicking on him, so it's possible.
Okay. I was just like, did I lose my
Um,
mind? But maybe I haven't lost my mind.
Yeah, Slavkovsky's a guy that I've honestly been thinking like I just want to click on, and I honestly want to click on Caulfield more too. Like it feels crazy given how high they're drafted and how bad the team should be, but um, I don't know. I don't really care between them. I think as long as it's not Chris Kreider, I'm fine clicking on Bess or Fiala in that range too. So yeah, I just sort of you know what happened? I think I start up all the guys just in order of ADP and then clicked Dobson and got so excited about it and asked Jay a question or something and then just forgot to make an actual pick. Because yeah, I don't think I would click
That's
Slavkovsky over
okay.
Kyrou if I
Honest,
were
you know,
fully locked in.
as Tom Olson's kind of mentioning here, a guy like Trevor Moore, especially, where I feel like we've talked about him a lot, and just mentioning the whole like could he be line 3 situation, and it's like, well, that's kind of why I'm just not clicking him at all. There's so many guys that went after him, and he went around his ADP. I think right, yeah, pretty much. But like, if we get news that it's him, Deneau, and Fogel as the third line, I mean, he doesn't go to 0, but like, man, like the idea
Yeah,
of him scoring in your roster is just
Well, and
gone.
the way they're
And a
structured
successful
anyway,
team.
people were saying with Dubois there last year that, oh, Dubois is, line 2 and it's pushing, Deneau and Moore to line 3, and then Moore had that production. That's just they just roll their lines like that. So I don't even
Yeah,
I wouldn't put too much on the number necessarily. I just put it on the correlation and who they're projected to play with. And Deneau and Moore have been glued at the hip, and they're just not
yeah,
high offensive upside players year over year. So
mhm.
I really think that's more of a one-off. Can he score 30 goals again? Yeah, but I
yeah.
mean,
Jay, do you have any favorite clicks? How about we can? Is there any? Oh, what? Oh, yeah.
Any other
This is the.
terrible we can say about Trevor Moore? I mean, I feel like we've talked about him almost every week, being like, yeah, we're just
And I
not
feel
clicking
like,
on him.
and I
This
feel like
pod
he's
is
such a
very
like
much.
a good story of last year. Like just the guy that's done it, kind of done it all, done it in so many different ways. Just such a like a all around good player that like I've loved. Like I love watching him, but like
oh yeah, me too. Love him.
yeah. I mean, again, like Joey might be even in here too. He took Vetrano as well, where it's just like, I mean, again, where's the puck going? It's not going that way, I don't think. So I'm gonna go to the guys it is
Well,
going to.
well, plus Arvidsson's not on his line anymore, so why should DJ even like him anymore? There's no reason.
If
Uh,
Arvidsson's projected for more than 25 games, I'd be surprised. But I love the man to the moon and back. I've taken him a couple times. I'm not gonna lie. Let's close the show with one more thing. This is the introduction to best puck fall. I have a couple ideas, and as long as you guys are okay to run with this, do we have any favorite clicks in general on the board right now? Just comfy clicks. When they get to you, you're just like, thank God, thank God. Round ADP. And Jay, have you drafted it all yet? I don't even know
Mm-mm. Nope.
how
So
many
leave
you've
me out of
done.
this.
So yeah.
I
All right,
spent all my time for you
we'll
guys
mention them, and
getting
then
these
you can.
rankings out. That's
Perfect,
all of you in
hmm.
general,
perfect.
not just you two.
We also I also need a lot of beer sent to my house if you're not busy. But yeah, well, so why don't we'll give a favorite click that we love to see get to us around the ADP or maybe a couple picks after, and then you can say good or bad or whatever. Matt, do you have
Okay.
one?
I can't. So my highest exposed player right now is Cutter Gauthier, but that is not a comfy click. That is me elbowing guys to the side and saying, I'm getting him. I couldn't get him in this draft. He went at 129 right before I was up at the turn 132. But with an ADP of like 145, I'm pretty aggressive in reaching for him in the 12th round, as opposed to letting him fall to me, which is I guess what you would call it. But Ovi, on the other hand, is a guy who regularly just is sitting there for me. And that's a third round pick, so it's not just like nothing. But my God, I cannot stop clicking on the man who just is destined to score goals in the NHL. Shoots a billion times a game, was actually a part of a really good power play last year that should only get better with the talent that they infused. So I don't know. I know he's old. I get it. He's a one-dimensional player at this point, but my God, that one dimension's awesome. So that's my comfy click right now.
Yeah, and it was mentioned here that I think I've talked about Kyra and Barzell with glowing raves every podcast. Did a whole video and went over how much I love both of those clicks. So I'm going to avoid those two this time, just to maybe get a little different and actually stick in LA and go with Kevin Fiala. He didn't get to me here, but when I have a McDavid, a McKinnon, a Matthews team, I really think like Fiala is the guy that has this massive ceiling that like could get just completely untapped in the right vacuum. I think that right vacuum is with Byfield at center. If we get that news in camp, I wonder if it doesn't boost him up a bit more. So right now, especially when he slips, I see him rising as time goes on. And he last year was a guy that was going much earlier and really didn't have a terrible year. Just didn't have explosive upside. Maybe the shot rates we wanted to see, but as you know, you get these teams that need a winger, and Fiala gets to me. Like I really do love this player for many different reasons, and has some pedigree for shooting. Just didn't see it as much as we would have liked last year. But that role is not going away. So Jay, what do you think of these two?
Well, I'll say with Ovi in particular, it's just that profile of a guy who can carry fantasy production on his own, because he just shoots so much and generates shots, and everything about his game is revolved around getting the puck in the offensive zone and shooting it. So guys like that, when they fall, it becomes a value. So when he's dropping, way off, obviously he had a bad first half of last year, but um, it that'll happen a little bit with age, but I just figure guys with that profile, when you see them dropping, that's where you can find value. And then someone more like Fiala's profile, where the offense is kind of centered around him when he's on the ice. I like guys like that too, where you want the puck on his stick. So I mean, I can see clicking on guys like that, even Kyrou and Barzal, guys who just make things happen, when they have the puck, just because they're not correlation dependent. I do harp on this correlation for some of the later round guys because it's like, well, they could get carried and whatever, or even the Velarde thing earlier. It's like he's gonna play with Winnipeg's best players, so that's why he's a value. But Velarde also has a profile to go along with it, so um, that's why I kind of like the Velarde pick late and those sort of things.
Yeah,
Fiala, I just don't see any crazy boost from last year, just because it's pretty much the same situation for him. But that doesn't mean he's still not a good pick at that ADP.
All right, I'll give one more quick while Matt thinks. Matt, are you ready? Actually, you're looking around.
I was just looking at the comments here. Yeah, the frost is the frost's back. Tyler there, just stealing Gautier out from under me. So
fully shaken ducks.
You've gained a new
Whacking up a
enemy
storm
here.
over there.
Exactly.
My question to him would be, what
yeah.
duck do you choose? Like, how McTavish is kind of my guy this year on the Ducks. I feel like he's going to be the centerpiece of that team, but I don't know. I don't even know which defenseman to choose. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Zellweger. But
yeah, to me the answer is Gautier because I think he adds an element that they don't have. They have 5 players, I think, who are tremendously gifted at moving the puck, but really I honestly don't even think McTavish is all that great of a goal scorer personally. Like I think he's better as like a facilitator. But like he just shot so much on the power play as a rookie that like I sort of have this vision of him as like the one-time sniper. But if Gautier hits in the NHL, it is going to be as a finisher. So like I'm just betting on that early because I believe in the ability of the Anaheim offense to generate looks for someone. And I think he's the guy that like they need to figure out who's going to score. Is it Troy Terry or is it Cutter Gauthier? I don't think, I don't think Troy Terry is anything that you're building your team around versus Cutter. His shot is ridiculous. I mean, his NCAA stats are transcendent as far as goal scoring. So like, that's why I'm just making this bet on him right now.
The thing with Cutter is he just hasn't done it before. And there are people who are slotted ahead of him at his position on the first and second line. So, and with higher draft capital, so I don't know. It's or at least similar draft capital because Cutter went 5th overall, I think. So
I mean, he also is the shiny new toy. So
yeah, but you never know what kind of offensive role Carlson could have. Maybe that's expanded or something. Those are my only. I mean, I love Cutter as a prospect, and I think everything you're saying is correct. It's just I personally lean towards McTavish, and I mean Vetrano was the guy who did it last year, which was kind of weird. So it's like I feel like anyone could pop off in that in that offense.
I mean,
Besides
McTavish is
Seacrest.
literally 20, is 21. We've seen it at the NHL level. He's the third overall pick. He's done it everywhere. So like, I largely agree. Center does hurt him, but he is I think he's honestly the perfect example of my second comfiest click, because when I have that last center to get in there, I went Celebrini this time. I don't even know if he has as much upside as McTavish. And I get that he's the number one player, and but the team is pretty bad. I'm not sure how they figure out a way to get Celebrini to kind of the lofty projections the sports books have, and I think some are going to weight him as. So I do like McTavish as one of my comfiest clicks. I'll include one more in there as well, just to kind of, we just talked a lot about McTavish. I will say that oh my God, why am I just blanking? I had a guy complete. Oh, I was going to go such a different direction that actually, is there anything else you want to close off on, Matt? Or are you good?
No, I'm good.
Another one of my later round comfiest clicks and didn't get back to me here. And I guess Frost once again, but Arison is like my third highest drafted player. And I just feel like when we're kind of getting to this point now where people are actively taking almost definite backups and guys that are just in what feel to me as more ambiguous situations over the guy that is the only one with real NHL experience in Philadelphia, a team that I don't think is going to make the playoffs, but could be at least around it. Again, like, is it a good situation? Is it a good coaching style? But probably, right? I mean, maybe they block enough shots to where it kind of sometimes makes you mad, but they will protect him. I just don't see a world where he doesn't see 50 starts.
You're talking Arison?
Arison, yeah.
I do see a world only because they had to promise
Come to mind.
Fedotov,
Come to
time,
my world.
NHL time to come over. But Arison, I mean, yeah. I mean, Arison's the guy, and he just got worn out last year. They played him so much. So you're right. I don't know how good that team's going to be. I think that was kind of a fluke season, to be honest.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, guys like Tyson Forrester are very favored by PuckLuck's model. So um, I I don't know. I just don't see that team being all that great. But again, if he's sitting there towards the end of the draft, it's like almost a no brainer. Like, yeah, let's get a guy. I mean, there is a ton of upside there, and he's shown solid goaltending. Since he's been in the NHL.
Yeah, I'm just dumping a
Matt, you
bunch of
got
links
one?
into the.
All right.
Sorry, I'll need to re-ask what the question is in a second, but I'm just dumping a bunch of links into the YouTube comments here. If you have not been, checking out, we talked about J Stuff about an hour ago. I showed the link or the landing page or whatever, but there's the landing page for J Stuff over at PuckLuck. I posted the link to my first Best Puck manifesto. There are 3 of them in the form of Leone's BBM manifestos for football. And also I posted a link to our Discord, because as much as I would love to do this all night, at some point here, I don't have any pressing need to go right now, but we are going to have to log off. So, keep the conversation going in our Discord. There's several people that are willing to give their takes day in, day out. And we've been talking about Best Puck all summer long and deep into the fall. So I just wanted to get those things out of the way for the people watching. And thank you so much for, participating in the chat and whatnot throughout this awesome episode so far. So what was the question?
Just if you had another comfy click. I think the comfy clicks are a fun way of putting it.
Yeah,
nice, cozy. You're sitting there, you're in bed, you're drafting, and you just think, oh God, this guy got to me. And you just nuzzle up next to which man, Matt? That's the question here.
I'm almost ashamed to admit it, because I'm just outing myself as someone who just loves the olds. But it really is Evgeny Malkin right now. Just getting someone in these last rounds. Did he even get? He literally did not even get drafted in this lobby.
He went undrafted.
And like, I get it.
Him,
Again, he's old, but like, this dude is, he's puck dominant. He's gonna be on the power play 1 alongside Sidney Crosby. Like, he's probably getting some exposure to Erik Karlsson. I know it wasn't quite as clear cut as I thought it would be last year, with the Chris Letang, kind of falling off last year for a bit. To the Karlsson, Malkin, and Letang Crosby duos didn't really line up like I imagined they would in my head. But I still believe that there's something there for Gino more than he put up last year. And if I'm looking for, single week spikes, I really do like him as a name versus some of these like prospecty types who I just don't know if they have the ability to like put their game on the stick or put the game on their stick in the way that Gino can.
Yeah, and that's kind of my outlook with any of this. I mean, everyone likes the shiny new toy, the unknown, what could be kind of thing, but it's like someone like Malkin. I mean, I was high on him last year and he underachieved. But
Yeah.
then you saw once Bunting got over there, things kind of clicked. Like those two on the line for some reason worked. So you just don't know. I mean, there's talent around them, so things could pick up again. I
Like, yeah,
mean, like you said, the opportunity's there.
will Eric Carlson man one of the league's worst power plays? Like, I just refuse to believe that's a sticky fact. Like that's just going to stick for all time. Like Sidney Crosby is still awesome. Eric Carlson is still awesome. I think Malkin still has it. So like they were the third worst power play last year by goals for, and like I think that's almost a positive because it literally can't get worse. And so, yeah, that's sort of my defense mechanism. But for sure, I get it. He's an old, and we like the shiny new toys for sure. Josh Norris is a guy who I'm sure by September 20th I'll be just hand over fist into my lineups. So yeah, can't wait.
Yeah. Do we want to do one more or want to close shop?
I'm good to keep going.
Jay, are you good? One more? One
Yeah.
more each. We'll get out of here.
Sure.
Hour 30. Pretty good. To kick off the Best Puck Fall, brought to you by whatever our sponsor is for this, Matt. I'm sure you know it, and it's going to be at the beginning. I have gone every position at this point. I kind of mentioned McTavish, so I will go defense. And this one stood out because I was like, I can't go 3. Is he even going to get? He didn't even get to me. Morgan Riley, though, at 93. I think that he normally goes much later than that, if I'm not wrong. That is one that I am starting to I think he continues to sit in that sort of where he goes a bit later, like I'm saying, is because enough people pass him by without a correlating piece. I think you could just take him. I don't think it matters that much. It's like, yeah, if you have Matthews or whatnot, you want to bump him up a little bit, go right ahead. But like, who else is going to be manning the power play in Toronto? Who else is going to be seeing a lot of that big offensive of time? They went out and got guys, but those guys are going to be more defensive minutes. I do think he could lose a touch of run, maybe, but I don't think it's going to affect his overall output. And I've been really just trying to say, like, I don't care if I have a Toronto guy, like, I'm just going to take him before, I'm not thinking take him before, I think there's a couple guys who went before that I could argue against. But normally when if someone clicks Brock Faber before Morgan Riley, I just clap my hands, say thank you, bid them adieu, grab the infinitely better play.
Yeah, and just looking at the depth chart and what I have laid out, I mean, who's threatening Riley? Ekman Larson, Timothy Liljegren. I know Jake McCabe got power play time last year. I mean, it was a joke. It really was. I mean, I was at KeyBank Center watching a game, and Jake McCabe is power play 1 defenseman, and I'm like, this is crazy. Riley was out, so well, with Riley in the lineup, I just feel like it's a no brainer that unit's been together. They know exactly what they want to do. That unit's been together for a long time. I think it's just fatigue, right? You've just drafted him for so long in the same. He's never really moved from the same value, so it's just drafting fatigue year over year. It's like voters fatigue for MVP.
Yeah,
He's
that
up to
was
100 actually.
that was me last year with John Klingberg. Oh well, Morgan Riley's just it's John Klingberg. Like you got to take him over Morgan Riley, and yeah, not great.
Yeah,
I guess if we're talking comfy clicks, it's not a comfy click that I'm making because I just checked my exposures, but I'm looking at this board and like, Charlie McAvoy stands out as a guy who just feels like Mo Seider,
smallest D on the team.
Good. Like, and he goes rounds after Mo Seider and he hits and he blocks and he plays all the minutes and like, I don't know, maybe McAvoy just isn't it. And like Mason Lohrei is going to take over. Like, seems unlikely though. So yeah, the Hampus Lindholm experiment was fun, but he's not a power play 1 guy. So like, yeah, McAvoy going in this range, makes more sense. I think the reason I don't have a ton is I do have a lot of John Carlson, and he was obviously a contender for this click too, because the Ovi thing, and I'm just pairing them up. But that felt kind of disingenuous to say, like, yeah, I like this Washington team that I think could be good and has a good power play already with very obvious contributors. So yeah, that's just sort of a range that I feel pretty good taking a defenseman in, I guess, late 10th, early 11th round.
He's kind of in that same boat with Riley,
Also
where
not
it's
getting the
like
low.
it's just that fatigue. He's been in the same spot, doing the same thing with the
Yeah.
same people, for a long time. So and Carlson's the same. It's very similar in their approach. And I think sometimes when you're drafting, and I'm at fault of this sometimes too, you want the next best thing, right? The next thing that's gonna pop. And these guys aren't going to necessarily take off and be league winners, but when their values, where they're being drafted, there's something to be said for that too. So you just I feel like you take enough of those guys, and in the aggregate, you're creating a league winner. So that's my approach
Yeah.
to drafting all the time with guys like that.
And this is such a weird draft for me because I have not. I guarantee I have not taken due defenseman by pick 73 ever. And this draft I decided to, just because again I really felt like I got buried at wing, and I was like I can catch up, because I do think that there is a ton of value in the later wingers. We've mentioned so many of them. Gunther's one that I love to click on. Lehkonen, like I said, I think he'll eventually bounce back up, especially even if he's back by the end of October. Like, I think that would almost be pessimistic at this point. Like, above the, and then Sharon Govich, et cetera. But like, I do think the allocation of your capital is one of the most important things that we haven't discussed maybe enough. And there's so many good defensemen in 8th to 11th round. And we just mentioned a few. There's Werenski, there's Carlson, John, Eric, that is. We already mentioned John, like Morgan Riley. There's so many there that I find myself oftentimes being like, I'll get one of them. And I don't think that the drop off between Adam Fox and these guys is that big. But the drop off between Kevin Fiala, Jordan Kyrou, and Pablo Busnevich, Jeff Skinner is pretty big. And I like Busnevich. That was probably a bad example. But the point being is, again, like, that's part of this. That plays in here. It might not play in as much in your home leagues. But again, I think that's important to note. Anything to add, Mr. Matt Moody? That couldn't even remember Mason Lohrei. What an idiot. This has been your worst stream of the year. Sorry, I had to get something back after you called me unintelligent.
I couldn't think of how to say his name because
I've never made a mistake in my life. So
I was picturing the letters and I just could not make them fit together in my head.
Honestly, so, yeah, that was your biggest mistake because it's not spelled very nicely.
I had a DJ experience for sure. We did get a couple people already joining the Discord, so just wanted to shout out Frostback and Incognito AA for joining. Yeah, big shout out. It's a free Discord, but I just found it cool that I actually said something and people took me up on it. So hopefully you enjoy your time in our nice little Discord. You
gotta kind of sell your soul, but maybe fine.
Not as bad as the ad reads on this full cast this week.
Oh my god. Oh yeah, everything gets worse over time, and only things are good from when they start and when I was younger. Yeah, agreed. That was so funny. Oh god, those guys.
Let's
talk
Jay,
about the underdog
anything
problems.
Okay. No, God no. Please no. Jay, anything else you want to say about the best puck plans for the regular season, anything of that sort over on PuckLuck, or your process or anything of the sort?
Well, I will be writing about the projections, like I said, and I mean, I talked a lot about it during this stream, but I'm going to try and put that into words and just kind of break down the whole process and make it a little more clear as to how much actually goes into this, because I think people will be surprised, like, how intricate every little detail is that's involved.
Are those paywalled, or are they like free to read and then
they're free?
Pay for
they're free to read. Yeah, you'll have to pay for the strategy, but you can go to the blogs section under community on PuckLuck.com, and you'll be able to find those articles there for free. And
awesome.
I will say I'm disappointed that one of your comfy clicks wasn't Miro Heiskanen. So,
I mean, my highest zone defense right now is Thomas Harley. So,
oh yeah,
love it.
You
can see where that stems from.
Mine too. How do
Yeah.
you do it? We did get a question about the raceback program, so I feel like,
Uh-oh.
and that'll, no, I'm just kidding.
PuckLuck.
It's bad.
Is there anything
It's
you want to
bad.
say? I've said enough. I tweeted out everything. Okay.
It's
Okay.
bad.
Okay. It's
It's
bad. Jay,
actively
any thoughts?
it's
Is it
actively
bad?
harming it's harming the NHL product. There's no potential for growth where people aren't incentivized in other sports to hand draft NHL teams. It's as simple as that. It incentivizes people to auto draft golf and to auto draft NBA. You just can't do that for hockey. I mean, you can, but because correlation is such a key component, and that there's no intelligent auto drafter on the underdog platform, you just can't do it. You can't play hockey and get to the levels that they're clearly trying to incentivize people to get to, and so that will follow the likes of DraftKings and FanDuel, where NHL's already beyond dead, and it'll just slowly kill the ecosystem and kill the engagement, and that sucks. Fortunately, DraftKings over the last couple of years, I think, has been pretty aggressive in their sizing of contests and whatnot. Like, they've eaten overlay a lot, as much as you like to shit on DraftKings. They're really keeping this in-season DFS game alive, in my opinion. So, yeah,
They're no longer
that's sort of
redacted. I mean, it's crazy.
my allegiance will always be with DraftKings. So, appreciate the underdog best puck platform, but the second DraftKings gets it, like, I'm all in there.
Yeah,
Jay,
no,
anything you
the
want to
issue.
mention?
Well, the issue I have every discussion I've had with underdog, and I like those guys over there, and especially in the early years, I was starting to develop a good relationship with a lot of them, but just my recent discussions are we're not going to push this. We're really not going to push hockey as a
Yeah.
product, and it's just very disappointing. They're not willing to even sponsor the product or pay content people to get the word out there about it. They're not concerned about it. They're more focused on their new ventures in betting and pushing everything football and NBA. So it's just very, very disappointing. I I wish, because there's some cool things I think that they're doing, baked into their products, and some cool avenues they could take things, but they're just not as much into the whole creative aspect anymore, and it's becoming just more, I don't know,
Yeah.
industrialized. I don't know what the correct word is.
Won't. Yeah, well, I won't get into my thoughts on the content they're creating because there are some good creators over there. I'm not gonna, belittle the whole thing. I obviously don't like some of it. I'm gonna make it vocal. I love the team over there. I'm pretty well intertwined with a lot of them, and they follow me, and I think they appreciate my opinion. I'm sure they're absolutely done with me at this point with what I've been saying, and they probably don't really even care. But yeah, no, it's all around bad for everyone that just enjoys to have fun and draft teams because they are going to do everything in their power to push you to pick'ems. And unfortunately, the pick'ems are no fun to play anymore, which is fair. I mean, eventually they were going to do it, but yeah, it's just another kind of just little piece, and they're just going to keep taking, and it just sucks. And to me, the biggest problem with all of it is if you take all of this, right, you take everything they're doing, but on the other end, they're giving us something back, right? Like, the interface isn't that good anymore. It used to be so much better than ever else. It breaks all the time. Like, the amount of drafts we've been in where people are like froze, this, that, the other thing. Like, they're just putting all their money into baskets that I just frankly don't care about. I hope others like it. I'm going to shut up about it all now. If you want to watch Bill Belichick, have fun. But I am just going to, I'm just going to do what I do. Maybe I'll draft a couple teams, but like, I was actually excited to take more and put more into football maybe and try to draft just because I do think it's so much softer than DraftKings. And now I'm like, what's the point? I'm never in a million years doing 250 drafts in a week. It takes forever. Like, if you're doing it by hand. So whatever. And I think every single person that is actively a part of their community that, really actually has waved the flag for them is worse today, which sucks because I've always thought of them as someone that really was going to care about that and continue to help the people that waved the flag for them. That did it from the beginning, but nope. Okay. I will stop talking now, unless if you guys want me to keep going.
No,
No,
I think
you finished that strong.
you're completely right. I'm not talking because I'm upset at what you're saying. It's all true, and yeah, sucks.
But But I do get it. I will say I get it. They have to pay back the investors at some point. They have to continue to grow, and they are. I'm not like saying that these are bad business decisions because I'm not near
Yeah.
the level. I really do think they're smart people. So I'm not
Um,
saying that. I hate it.
here's a question. I'm guessing the answer is no, but Jay, have you talked to drafters at all?
I have not.
Like
No.
the company drafters? Because
Yeah.
my thought is they're based in Ontario, and apparently people in Ontario can play on drafters. Now, I'm pretty sure at this moment they still have not posted an NHL contest, which does not bode well.
They're
But
supposed
like
to.
last year they posted an NHL contest, and it filled almost immediately. Now it was pretty small, and whatever else, but it is an interesting intersection of it does seem like Ontario players can mix with the rest of the country in the U.S. Whereas on Underdog and DraftKings, for example, Ontario players are blocked, and because there's some rule that if you have like a sports offering or a betting offering, you can't pool Ontario money without external money, and for some reason, drafters can skirt that, which does seem like Ontario could be, drafters could be the next big thing in hockey because there's all these underserved hockey people. But that clearly
And
doesn't exist right now. But I was just wondering
if
if you'd had that
they
conversation, and
both
obviously the
they
answer
did
is
one
no.
contest and it filled in like 2 weeks, and they posted a second of the same size, and it was like I remember when they posted, I was like, this should fill. I feel like so. Yeah, no, Jay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely open to reaching out to anyone that's interested in growing fantasy hockey in any way. Those are the kind of people with the ones with a vision of where this product could be, and I think we can take it there. So, those are the people I want to partner with, and
yeah,
that's part of why I'm so
Yeah,
disappointed in Underdog is just because I thought they had that vision. My initial discussions were all um, all signs pointing towards we can grow this hockey product into something. It's never going to be football, it's never going to be NBA, but to make it a strong product. And I thought they were taking the right steps and taking it there, and
they all
everything
again.
fizzled.
And I agree with what you're saying, and I heard similar things. They never actually tried. That was my. It was
Right.
always this. We're gonna try, and we see it, and then by the time it got to the point where it is now, which again I don't know enough to say anything with certainty, so I'm just gonna shut up about most of it. But like I'm not saying it's bad business. I'm just saying that it's incredibly disappointing, I
mhm,
do think it's worse for the majority of people, almost all of them, like 90 whatever percent.
Uh,
And I hope that another site picks it up because this type of product and this type of offering is so much more of an impact in a sport like hockey, where people do. It's not ingrained the fantasy aspect in anything, in really anything in the world. Like, and the NHL is pushing it more, so maybe it gets a little bit more fluidity. But I mean, until there's a site that actually takes it on as a project, pushes it out there, tries to show people that it exists, and makes it a point, it's just always going to kind of waver away. And I guess the last point to all of that is name one of these sites that has done anything related to a different format, right? Like, I mean, we're talking about almost a different product entirely, right? Like with the best puck or best, ball mentality of drafting and playing in hockey compared to the season long. It is just, they haven't even heard of it. And these are people that actively participate in the community to a pretty heavy degree. So, um, you know, I've done a little reflection myself. Maybe I just reach out to more people and say, like, let's just draft. And I started to do that a little bit more because why not? But any last notes? We
yeah.
should probably get out of here. It's 11.
And I'm not just pandering because the record will show I did say this. I think in the Discord and on one of our live streams in the last few weeks. But I think I do seriously think one of the best ways to grow the fantasy hockey space is to support the fantasy hockey tools and surrounding infrastructure, because frankly that doesn't exist right now. Like we're talking about specifically, EP Rinkside, Dauber, The Athletic. They're all posting things that are kind of maybe related to the best buck, the game that we actually like to play. Now some of us are involved in season long fantasy leagues, but it's just different. Like that it's different from the top end prizes, the daily DraftKings stuff like that we do, the underdog pick'ems and whatnot. Supporting the tools that surround that is the really only way I think that's in our control to sort of actually grow the space, because then you incentivize other people Oh wow, look at that tweet. Live breaking on air. Um,
It's coming.
drafters drafters responded with a gift saying very, very soon for hockey. So kudos for that. But anyway, where I was getting to is you need to prove that there's a demand for not just the game, but also the infrastructure around the game, because that's how you get sites like Stochastic, like ETR, like Roto Grinders to invest in the sport of hockey. And so, not saying just give Jay your money because you're just trying to prove a point, but if you're on the fence, like do think of it like that, because I seriously believe that making sure that, that PuckLuck doesn't go under because no one cares about it, but like, sites will see that. People know that there's not money in fantasy hockey right now because there's just not enough money up top. People don't care about it. There's 25K on the table here on Underdog. Like, this is not nothing. So like, maybe invest in it and see what happens at the very least. Like, I really do think that's like our final frontier, so to speak, before, like on FanDuel, where the hockey product just crumbles into nothing because no one really cares about it. Like, being engaged with the product, I think, is one of your best ways to support it right now.
Yeah, and telling people about it, right? Everyone, in this in this chat and everything right now, you all know someone who's adjacent to fantasy hockey but isn't fully invested into it like you are, or anything. And just keep spreading the word, keep pushing it, keep letting them know there are resources like PuckLuck available or other sites, and let them know about where, they can utilize these tools, on whether it's on drafters or on underdog, or the kind of stuff you enjoy, and just keep pushing that. And I mean, fantasy football is huge. Fantasy hockey can be the same thing. It's just people don't trust it. Those who know a little bit about fantasy football are jumping into it. Those who know a little bit about fantasy hockey can't find the
Yeah.
tools to jump into it. So
There's
that's the whole goal with PuckLuck, is just to get people comfortable with betting on hockey or playing fantasy hockey, because there's always these tools to fall back on.
Yeah, that they like in football, there's a fantasy site right now that last year had someone going in behind the scenes, changing information, basically stealing money from participants. That site was not the site, I believe, that charges 40% rake and also changed Taysom Hill at the last minute to a different position on the eve of the regular season. And football is the one that's trusted. Like, these are not Underdog and
Yeah.
DraftKings, but they are offering $1 million prize pools in football. And Underdog is doing this stuff and giving money to Bill fucking Belichick, and DraftKings is DraftKings and changing their rewards program every 4 minutes to, screw us over. It's not like football is king. It's football is what people want to do. And so, it's just funny to hear you say people don't trust hockey, because that's truly what it is. And we've done nothing wrong besides the fact that Gary Bettman sucks. And yes, we finally ended it. Gary Bettman sucks. I think that is a good closing statement.
No notes. But we will continue this conversation every single time we talk, and I do love doing it. And it's probably my favorite conversation is getting mad about hockey. I think it's actually my lifeblood. Like getting. I wake up at 7 in the morning. I gotta go to work, and I'm like, oh, later I get to call Matt and bitch about hockey while he like types on Excel. All right, well, Jay, you're back now. I know, and we're gonna have you on again. So thank you for joining. Is there any last elevator pitch? We've just given like 4. Besides Gary Bettman sucks, is there any last thing you want to say? Although you might like him because maybe he's come around and he likes you. Yeah, we'll be back next Tuesday. 100%.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, no big elevator pitch. The tools are available on the site. It's the same stuff that has been made available to you. I will say there's a redesign that's in process. The site will look um, more visually appealing, completely different, I almost want to say, and with new tools baked into it. I've been working on that adjacent with all these projections, and it's been a lot of work. And for some reason, I think I can be a web developer and a statistician at the same time, and also a sports writer with a full-time job. So
Yeah.
I don't know why I immerse myself into these things, but I don't know.
I don't
But
know. I don't know why you just spent 2 hours on the call with a bunch of donkeys, but we appreciate it nonetheless.
Yeah. So if you can just support me
Yeehaw.
at PuckLuck, because I do a lot of work there, and I really do want to see this pay off for everyone. They are reliable tools, so just get over there. Even if you're just checking out the site for free and being involved in the community, it's big. So
Okay.
All right.
Matt, why don't you close us out?
Yes, so we will be back here next Tuesday, normal time. This week was with the holiday and everything, and Stochastic moving. We were a bit later than usual, but next week it should be around that 8:30, 8:45 that you are used to. And thank you to everyone for coming, hanging out, and thank you to Jay for joining us. So check out puckluck.com, check out the manifesto on my newsletter, moods.beehive.com, and check out DJ's content on his YouTube channel. If you're listening to this on the pod feed, it's in the description. And of course, if you're watching this on a live stream, click back on DJ's profile and you'll see some, some actual content that he made. That's not just us on live streams, shooting the shit. So all good stuff, a lot more to come. Only a few more weeks until we get some sweet, sweet preseason action. So thank you to everyone for hanging out. From Jay, from Doug, from DJ, and from myself, have a good September, everybody, and we will see ya.